አደባባይ ሚዲያ ለወገንተኝነት ጀርባውን የሰጠ ጊዜያዊ ጥቅምን አምቢኝ ብለው የዘመመን ሊያቀና እውነትና እውቀትን አስከትሎ ኢኮኖሚያዊና መንፈሳዊ መረጃዎችን እንካችሁ ይላል። ትኩስ ዜናዎች፣ ዘጋቢ ፊልሞች፣ ጥልቅ ትንታኔዎች በአደባባይ ሚዲያ ይቀርባሉ። ራእያችን ጊዜውን ያማከለና ዘመኑን የዋጀ በእውነት የነጠሩ መረጃዎችን በእውቀት ደግፎ ለሀገራችን ብሎ ለዓለም ሕዝብ ማዳረስ ነው። አድሬሳችን አደባባይ ኢንፎ ሚዲያ @gmail.com፣ ዌብሳይታችን www.adebabai.com። ያግኙን፣ ይርዱን። የሁላችንም ስለሆነች ኢትዮጵያ በአደባባይ እንዘግባለን። አደባባይ ሚዲያ
Adebabay media kan hunduma keenya kan taate waa'ee Ethiopia Adebabay irratti ni gabaasa. Adebabay kan hundumaati. kan hunduma keenya kan taate waa'ee Ethiopia Adebabay irratti ni gabaasa. Peejii Facebookii Adebabay Miidiyaaf chaanaalii YouTube keenya irratti nu hordofaa. Adebabay Miidiyaa.
Welcome everyone, and thank you for joining us this evening, or from where you are at from around the world. This is Adebabay Media Viewers Digest program. My name is Ephrem here from Nashville, Tennessee, along with my co-host Elias from Seattle. Today we will be discussing the current state of Ethiopia, the Orthodox Church, and the attacks on citizens that followed the murder of our brother Hachalu Hundessa, and how we can be better understand and contextualize these events. So please have an open mind, get comfortable, and stay tuned.
Welcome back, everyone. For those of you that are just joining us, today we're going to be talking about the state of Ethiopia, our Orthodox Church, and the attacks we've been seeing, especially in the last few months. Today, our guests are Malaka Edom, Kesis Ephrem Eshete from Texas, and Diakon Henok Elias from California. Thank you for accepting our invitation and participating in this conversation with us today.
Thank you for having us.
Of course.
Yes, thank you for having us.
Before we start this conversation, I'm gonna let Ephrem tell us a bit about the current events in Ethiopia.
Thank you, Elias, and it's really nice being with you, Malaka Edom and Diakon Henok. As reports indicate, since the murder of artist Hachalu Hundessa, to date since June 29th, 239 people, as we know from the sources that we have, 239 people have been killed by a mob, mostly of young Oromo men and some women, carrying petrol, sticks, machetes, knives, attacking unarmed citizens, burning down and vandalizing places of work, hospitals, schools, and churches, along with more than 239 innocent lives lost, whom were our majority Orthodox Christians. 2 churches have been burned down to ashes. 7,000 people have been internationally or internally displaced. Although some reports now put the number at 10,000, these outbreaks were widespread across the region of Oromia. We have been watching horrific footage that is coming out of Ethiopia, some very hard to watch in completion, and reports show that the killings of innocents was across both ethnic and religious lines, or religious based, where these identities are minority in these cities of attack or in Oromia region. This has sparked a conversation on whether or not an ethnically or religiously motivated genocide, to be exact, a genocide of religious fundamentalism based on ethnic nationalism, is occurring in Ethiopia. So that's the conversation we're going to try to have today. But note here, when we say ethnic and religious minorities, we don't mean ethnic and religious minorities in general or in Ethiopia, but specifically as a country, but in Oromia region.
Yeah. Before we start our question, I'd like to welcome back our speakers again. And I know both of you don't need an introduction, but if you could quickly introduce yourself a little bit and tell us about the work you've been doing on your platform, and then we could continue this conversation a bit.
Who is that for?
Both of you. So I'll start with Ephrem.
Okay, so my name is Kesis Eshete. I work for Adebabay here in the other programs, and we have been we started Adebabay in such like this one for about now a year, and we have English and Amharic and sometimes Oromif programs, and this is one of our programs. And so I work for Adebabay. Thank you for having us.
Thank you. And Henok, you could tell us a little bit about yourself and the work you do.
Yes, thank you for having me. I am someone who's very interested in languages. I was born and raised in the United States, specifically Los Angeles, but I really love our country, Ethiopia. My undergraduate studies were in political science. My graduate studies were in dispute resolution, or Shimgalina, peace. And so I try through two of my platforms, one, the Tawahado Bible Study, to bring a religious perspective, sharing with people the life-giving word of God, to spread peace. And then from my other channel, to kind of affect the culture on the philosophy of art and science, I examine beauty, Ethiopian studies, and humor to try to get folks to focus on what is great about life and to get away from the kind of death and destruction, which is our lovely topic of today.
So we talked with both of you about our goal for this event, but to just kind of summarize what we're aiming at, and for you and also for our viewers, few of the questions we're gonna try to answer is why the murder of Hachalu Hundessa has sparked a wave of violence across the Oromia region, if the attacks have a hallmark of genocide, or if genocide is already well underway in Ethiopia, and what would this mean to Ethiopia as a country and to our church, and what we could do as Ethiopian Americans to add to the conversation in a positive way, or if there's any work that we need to be doing right now. With me being saying that, I will pass this over to Ephrem to start us off with our first question.
Thank you, Hewitt. Again, it's an honor to be with both of you. Of course, Malaka Edom and my brother Diakon Henok. Why, like as Hewitt has said, and in our introduction, we have mentioned that even though there are ongoing conflicts for the past 3 years in Ethiopia, specifically, we're going to discuss on what happened after the death of Hachalu Hundessa. So why do you think has this death unleashed a mob violence with unprecedented cruelty in a way that violated every human rights, basically, in the mark or in the books? And like when I say this, again, we understand that these attacks, these violence did not start after Hachalu Hundessa, but what we have been witnessing and seeing have been shaped in a very different form, and again with all the books of cruelty we've seen, and still there are videos coming out. So why has this specific time do you think is different than other times? If we could start with Malaka Edom and then
okay, so why the killing of Hachalu Hundessa triggered this manslaughter and a kind of genocide now happening in Ethiopia? Let me use a report by Minority Rights. They said at least there are 4 things that they have witnessed The attacks were premeditated, and the federal and the local government officials were part of this manslaughter that they had on the Christians and people of non-Oromo descent. And also they used the media, specifically the Oromo media, OMN, and also the killings has been head driven, although the perpetrators were young people from the ages of maybe 12 and 13 to the late 20s. So why the killing triggered? I don't think it was the killing of Hachalu. It was already planned. They were looking for any excuse to commit these atrocities against Christians, and specifically Christians, and also other Oromo of non-Oromo speaking people. Majorly, the killing was based on religion, because when you see the places where these problems have been happening for over a month now, if you go to Bali, RC, and also Hararghe regions, they are predominantly Muslim areas. It's not just because the majority is Muslim, but they have this organized group that hate the Orthodox Church as an enemy of the Oromo people, and also our church is considered as one of the enemies of the Oromo people and also the Oromo politics. So the killing of Hachalu was just one of the triggering things. Otherwise, it was already planned. It was only way.
Thank you, Malaka Edom. And just to add on this, and Dagon Henok, you could also answer, going back to Malaka Edom, why do you think specifically, even though first we've discussed many times that their code, they attack what they're against is either the Amhara or the Neftanya, as they call them, as a code, but what the facts show is overwhelmingly it is specifically the Ethiopian Orthodox Tewahedo targeted violence that's been attacks that have been perpetrated. Why do you think the Orthodox Church has been the center of their attack, or the center of their hate? If you could also add this.
For me, okay. So, I really appreciate what Malaka Edom said in terms of focusing on what one of your previous guests, Professor Ephrem Isaac, had focused on. And he said, Oromo speaking. I hope people paid attention to what Kesis Ephrem said. He said, Oromo speaking. In my own family and others, I've seen various people speak many of the languages of Ethiopia. My own paternal grandfather spoke 10 languages, including Somali, Afar Oromo, Amarinya, and a little bit of Ge'ez. So the important thing is a lot of what these militant people are painting to be an ethnicity, there's not a lot of rigorous science behind it as well. A lot of it is concocted. And so I like the way that Malaka Edom framed this in terms of religiosity, because one of the targets we have seen is the Orthodox Christianity. And it's not that surprising. On my own channel, what I've been trying to do is get people more excited about studying the history so that they can be equipped with more facts when we see that history is being weaponized against people with living bodies, and those bodies are getting battered and taken away. And our people are being destroyed for this lack of understanding. So I think we have to look at it in the larger context of the two major regime changes, which has happened in the past 50 or so years. And one of the biggest reversals in that initial takeover, when the Marxist communist regime, the Derg, the military junta, dethroned the Christian monarchy that existed, is that at that time, in the time that my parents grew up in Ethiopia and many others, the Orthodox Christian Church was the state religion. And so a lot of these people, they make slideshows on social media and such, and they pretend that history began in the 1800s. And if you look at history from the 1800s till now, being honest, it is quite one-sided, and there is a pretty clear, overall loser. And how they respond to that is, I think, the question that needs to be answered. And there is some sense in which, because church and state were one, that some of these figures are trying to lay the blame on the church itself, as opposed to specific figures who may have been there at specific times. And I myself have been, I think, one of the most critical people of the monarchy that came before. But I found myself turning into an advocate the way people were, again, trying to act as if history began in the 1800s, as opposed to some of the migrations we know that are documented from the 1500s, and that we have plenty of writing and evidence to back up. But I think the kind of lack of studying, lack of history, beginning with the 60 dukes, that are slaughtered by the communists, and many more, since we have lost a lot of our elders, we have lost this intergenerational communication and this kind of rigor. Again, Malaka Edo mentioned, it's not an Islam versus an Orthodox Christianity. You all have this beautiful, beautiful image in your intro of the Grand Mufti, one of the great religious leaders of the Muslim communities in Ethiopia. And you see with what respect during the national prayer hour, our fathers, the bishops of the Holy Synod of the Orthodox Church, and him get along. In fact, at one point he was so humble, he said, their prayer is enough for me. I don't even need to add any more prayer. They prayed for us. And so I think we need to look into the deep ties, the centuries of peace that we've had, and to kind of combat this, in my opinion, frankly, illiteracy in regards to Ethiopian studies and Oromo studies.
That is beautifully said. But to build on to that, so you kind of gave us the framework in which you can understand this. And there's also another framework that we're being given, that there's that historical grievance or oppression one group is claiming over the other, right? How do we bridge that outside of just education? Is that in a way that we speak to each other? Is that in a way that we continue to bring to build correlation amongst each other? What's the solution to this? Because I feel like us saying education is important makes it so that it leaves that job, that responsibility to the government, right? So how do we take part in this? Kesis Ephrem could start this.
Okay. So before the solution, let us diagnose the problem well and thoroughly, so that we can reach out any kind of solution that we want to reach out. So what's the problem? What's the problem we have? What's the problem at hand? Our problem is basically ill education, ill information, and also very toxic environment that has been built for the last 50, 60 years amongst the so-called Western educated Ethiopian elites. So the problem has been imported, and the template for the way they see Ethiopia, it is foreign, it's not domestic, it is very alien to the history and the society of Ethiopia. So, for example, one of the historian, the revered Oromo intellectual, Professor Asafa Jalata, he equated the Oromo of Ethiopia with the black people of USA. So he just tried to equate all the history of the African Americans in the US to the history of the Oromo in Ethiopia. One of the things that we have as an Ethiopian is the mentality of freedom, the mentality of a free man. This is I can't imagine how much money, how much wealth you should have to have this kind of mentality. As an Ethiopian, we are free people. We have never been colonized. We have never been slaves. So we don't know how people who live under the tyranny of slavery live. So these people from Western educated Oromo people who are ill-informed, who are really, they have this toxic knowledge, and they try to manipulate and brainwash the young people of Oromo descent, and to try to make them to think like an African American here in the US. It's really a pity to, as a person myself from Oromo families, to see my own Oromo speaking people to think that they have been enslaved, and to have the young generation to be educated with this slave mentality. Sorry to say, I don't know if you have another better term, Deacon Elias, Deacon Henok. So this is a problem. So before we go to the solution, let us talk a little bit about the problem we have at hand, especially for those people who were born or maybe who were raised in the U.S. Ethiopians of any families from any of the ethnicities in Ethiopia. So who are you as an Ethiopian? What is your history as an Ethiopian? Were you a slave at any time in your history in Ethiopia? The answer, the simple answer is no. You are free people. You have never been colonized. You have never been enslaved. So don't think like a slave person and try to come up with any solution. Black Lives Matter has no place in Ethiopia. There is no one ethnic group that has been colonized and enslaved by their own prison. So let us talk about the problem for a little bit here, and time we can reach at the conclusion and the solution.
Maybe speaking about the Black Lives Matter and the movement we've been seeing as Ephrem, like you mentioned, is there there's this simplification of the African American experience that not fully understanding what the slave experience was, and not even giving the respect that it deserves to fully understand that we will never know, we'll never understand as free nation, free thinking people, that were never displaced, that were never forced into labor for hundreds and hundreds of years. And for us to equate our lives and our experiences and our struggles to that struggle, to that experience on itself has its own problem, right? And we've seen those posters that have been going around. And one of the things that caught my eye was about how we talk about, when you talk about the Black Lives Matter movement and the mobs that people are mentioning. And there was that sense of them trying to compare, like, see, they're calling us mobs. And I want to take this back to Diakon Henok to see, like, how is that mob mentality different, if any, or similar, if any, with the Black Lives Matter movement?
Yeah, thank you for your question. It's very dangerous. There are a lot of studies that show that people in mobs behave differently than people in individuals. And so, we'll get to the solutions earlier, but I think, or later on, but I think one of the things initially we can say before we do get to that, as we're diagnosing the problem still, is to look at the difference between individuals and mobs. And it's much easier for us as individuals to reach out to individual people we know in our communities and to continue these conversations. And I think, again, we'll flesh it out in more detail later, but having this platform and using it to talk about this issue the way you all have been doing for a year now, I think is really one phenomenal way of doing this. And to approach kind of this greater topic, I like that Malaka Edom mentioned the kind of Western modernization. I just got done reading an article by Professor Masai Kabeda in Dayton, Ohio, and he wrote about this book called Takami Mikr, or Useful Advice, by Alaka Asras Yaniso. And in that book, Alaka Asras describes the process in which Ethiopia modernized. And it's not that modernization or modernity or modernism is wrong per se, but the way that we went about it, the way that we painted that kind of historical narrative to the present, a lot of people neglected Ge'ez. And when you neglect Ge'ez, sometimes people think we obsess about it in the Orthodox Church. It's not without reason. Yes, we worship God in this language, but beyond that, the vast majority of the art, the history, the literature, the kind of techniques of our artisans and our craftspeople, all of that is written in Ge'ez. And it's really been the only written language up until very recently. More recently, Amharic and Tigrinya, and again, more recently, Afan Oromo and Guraginya and Somali and Afa, they've begun to be written. But really, when you dig into the past, it's Ge'ez which was written and which has preserved most of our wisdom. And so what a lot of people did is they began picking up foreign languages because they thought that would be better for them, because that would be able to get them better jobs. And in that narrow sense, they were right. They got better money. They were able to move into the diaspora and give birth to children like me. But what they did when they neglected Ge'ez is they neglected the whole area of Ethiopian studies, allowed other people to take over those narratives. And what they did is, without knowing it, they allowed themselves to be intellectually colonized. While we may have defeated the Italians physically, we allowed an intellectual colonization to sneak in to our mentality, that slave mentality. I don't think it was inappropriate of Malaki Edom to say that. The slave mentality, where we would think that a group of people like ADOS, as they're referred to now, African descendants of slaves in the United States, were brought here on ships against their will, coercively, for chattel slavery, as opposed to the way that the Oromo entered Ethiopian history, which is very different, which is migration. And again, here, this is where so many people have arguments. Some people use inflammatory language. They'll say an invasion or aggressive expansion or whatever it may be. We know at one point in history, we don't see a lot of writing. And at another point in history, generally from the 1500s to the present, we begin to see descriptions of these movements and frankly, mixing for hundreds of years. Another issue is there's often people trying to make a north-south divide or a Semitic Arab invader, which is itself false anthropology from European anthropologists who did not base a lot of their work in science, versus kind of southern Cushitic peoples. And yet we have Semitic peoples in the south. We have the Harari, right? Those who speak Gesinan. We have the Gurage, again, Semitic speakers in the south. We have Argoba, again, Semitic speakers in the south. In the north, the predominant kind of ethnicity that was there, that mixed, again, for centuries, almost millennia now, with Semitic speakers, are the Cushitic Agou. So you have the Agou people, which again come in so many varieties. And so even the so-called Semitic peoples, they're speakers. They speak Semitic languages. But if you try to do blood tests, I personally did DNA tests and exchanged with some people and found some very interesting results. It didn't match the narratives that people had. So again, we have Agou people. We have all the other people I mentioned, all these various Cushitic and Semitic speakers. And they try to claim this sort of indigenousness, almost like the American Indians in the United States. If anyone is going to make that argument, and I'm going to listen to them, it's going to be Obeng Meto and other Nilotic speakers. If Nilotic speakers want to make that argument, that's backed in a little bit more rigorous science and history. And I'm willing to hear it from them. But from fellow Afro-Asiatic people who have been mixing very much so for the past 300, 400 years, Alessamacho.
Allow me to interrupt here.
Okay.
If I may. So I think we should recommend this DNTS to any ethnocentric politicians. I don't know if you know our own poet, Solomon, who died a couple of years ago in Minnesota. Solomon Eresa, he said, "You don't know who walked by your village generations ago." So to say that I'm from this tribe, or to say that from that tribe, I'm the most, so to say, clean one of 100% of this tribe or that tribe, it's really I don't know. I would have used another better term if it was in Amharic, but I'm Miasazino. Because you can't for sure say because of the language now you speak your family, you know your family speak now. It doesn't mean that you have been part of that ethnic group for 100, maybe 1,000 of years. Sorry to interrupt you, Dick and Henok, please.
No, I was done. That's exactly right. And again, I'm on 23andMe. So people can search Henok Elias on 23andMe. I'll exchange with anyone who says they're anything. I'll tell you a personal anecdote. You know, my family is pretty close to as Amharic speaking as possible. But even us, we have stories. You know, I have some family from northern Shoa. And, you know, Shoa is one of the places where there's just been the absolute most mixing. We have stories of exactly what you said, you know, of so-and-so. It sounds like Abraham and Sarah, you know, so-and-so, Makkan Neberet, she was barren. And so we had to go to this next village over and somebody came. And I've heard stories like this from my great aunts, from my grandparents. And so I know, you know, there's no way this so-called pure blood, as you said, theory it's bunk. And I really, like, I would put my own skin in the game or blood in the game as it is, and I would encourage others, just like you did, to do that, to falsify that, and again, to just contribute to the body of knowledge and understanding that we have.
Yeah.
And may I just add on this? Our names are also intermingled and mixed, and that's something I actually just came to learn. Like with the story I actually love to tell nowadays is my last name is Magenta. That's my grandfather name. I haven't met him, but Magenta is actually a completely different language driven word in Hadiya and Oromenya. Where Hadiya, I mean, I don't even know where the tribe is from, but my name is actually from Hadiya, which means salamta, or giving peace. But in Oromenya, it's giving thanks to the Lord. So completely different, opposite meanings, but driven from two different languages. So even our names are intermingled in the culture, not just ethnic based, but our names are unique. So I just wanted to throw that out.
Yeah. I guess to add to that, maybe more of a question. If we understand that the language is intermingled, the culture is intermingled, and we can't say there is one specific, I can't say I'm Amara and like everything I own is distinctly Amara or distinctly Oromo. How is it possible for us to continue to create these divisions amongst each other? What is causing that to happen? And how could they possibly sell that to us when we know that? I remember one of your episodes, on Henok, one of your speakers was talking about Abaora is not Amarinya word. And I was just surprised, like, what? And I always thought it was that, right? So how can we, when we have intermarried, when our cultures have intermarried, how do we say this is the difference, our difference is this line, and from this line to that line is you and this is me, and create division there and be willing to kill each other for it? How do we get to that point?
I think it's, again, I'm biased towards studying, but it takes studying to know which thing is from which group. We could keep going. The word Amharic chifra comes from Afan Oromo chibra. The word guddifacha is Oromo, it means adoption, right? And the other one, it means an army, right? These words, they're very interconnected. Everybody knows that kutfo is gurage food. Those who really know that it's not meant to be eaten with injera. It's meant to be eaten with or wusa. And yet people eat it with injera all the time because it's mixed. And, I think earlier we mentioned the kind of religious component, right? And so the religious component is important, and it's good to lay all of the kind of religions out, right? There are still, to this day, although there are much less, Waqefanna religions. There's Protestant Christianity, Catholic Christianity, Orthodox Christianity, various forms of Islam, although they're closer together, and they're predominantly the Sunni or Sufi. And there are these various religions that people have. Those are identity markers because they're less ethnic based. Those are clearer to identify. But another kind of frame that we can give, and we've seen this in kind of the most militant, some of the people calling for foreign countries to invade. And again, I've seen that on Twitter and Instagram. I've seen people inciting civil war and inciting, conflict to, take back Finfinne or Addis Ababa. Again, things that are not very strongly based and that are arbitrarily chosen. So the kind of other frame of reference, I think, are people who identify as an Ethiopian, people who identify as an Ethiopian nationalist, versus those who identify with the smaller regions, which have only been around since 1991. And I won't tell you my age, but I'll tell you that that's younger than me. So even the current setup, the way that the regions were assembled, when I was born, they were not assembled that way. And so while I was a baby, they changed. And so there's a certain level of arbitrariness to when that happened. And by the way, my grandfather at the time, in a journal called Ya'arbenyoch Dims, he wrote a letter. One of the most famous kind of questions that are still being asked about. He wrote a letter in the early 90s asking why, for example, Walqaitz Agade, Humara, Salamti, these areas would be moved from what was historically Gwandar or Bagemdar into the Tigray region. There are parts of Wallo that were also moved into the to the Tigray region. There are all sorts of things that were shifted around. The current view of what Oromia is, people talk about in the genocide article you shared this morning on this program, greater Oromia, lesser Oromia. There's so many moving and shifting definitions. But you see, I think the most militant people are people who are asking for a secession. And we know that there is a stipulation within the Constitution. A lot of people quote Article 39, and it's there. There's some framework, but I think there's not a lot of clarity of how exactly has it been enacted. We've seen various people, Walaita most recently, right, Gurage, who are asking to be autonomous and create their own new regions because, again, they felt that they were put into this blob of the southern zone that they didn't identify with as much. But we see the militant folks are really those who want to have some sort of armed conflict. And in my opinion, they want to make themselves as a self-fulfilling prophecy into the victims that they're claiming to be, that they don't have evidence for in the past, but they're trying to create a situation in which they would be brutalized. Because to be honest, there are way more people. If you looked at all of Ethiopia, Diakon Ephrem earlier talked about the difference between calling someone a minority in a region versus a minority within all of Ethiopia and making that distinction. I would make the same distinction. And I would say this kind of viewpoint of secession is very minority. The people who maybe have the greatest claim to it would be in Borana, not the people in Addis Ababa. And even them, if you polled the elders, I would sincerely doubt that even they would be for such a thing. But I think we need to explore and have avenues like this that you're talking about to see what are the specific goals that you're talking about, and how can we avoid this sort of armed conflict through the dialogue that you all are leading.
Yeah, could you tell us a little bit about who the Borana are for the viewers that may not know?
Yeah, so the Borana are on the Kenyan-Ethiopian border, which is the southern border of Ethiopia. According to many resources, this is one of the homeland and origin points of the Oromo through history, especially documented, for example, in the two books on the Gadda, or the indigenous democracy or governance system that Professor Asmarom Lagasa, by the way, an Eritrean, who focused on that study, showed, is that the migrations from the 1500s to the current expanded as far north from about the Kenyan border, from the 1500s to present, to Raya, which is on the border of Wallo, the formerly called Wallo, which is in the Amhara region today, and the southern border of the Tigray region, and as far south and east as the middle of Kenya. And so there are, as we keep saying, Oromo speakers within the nation state of Kenya, which was, of course, was under British colonial rule, and a lot of these borders, they're not exactly precise. We survived by the hair on our chinny chin chin, and we did so with colonial powers on all our sides. The French, the British, the Italian, and so there are Oromo speakers within the Kenyan nation state as well as the Ethiopian nation state, and to some extent within the the various three states of which the Somalia is cut up into.
Can I jump in here?
Yes, absolutely.
So the Borana are the older brothers among the Oromos. So in a gathering, if during a prayer, for example, just an Oromo prayer, if there is a Borana person among that in the prayer or in the Murriqat, for example, he'll always get the first to give his blessing. So the Boranas are the oldest among the Oromo brothers. So the Borana are now cut into two. Some are in Kenya, northern Kenya, as you said. I made this in one of our shows yesterday or the day before. And a friend of mine used to work in Kenya, so he knows Kenya in and out. And he told me that if you go to any Borana house in Kenya, you will see the tricolor Ethiopian flag. They always dream of going back to home. Then it means Ethiopia. The Borana are the least infiltrated by this ethnic-based toxic Oromo politics. They are the most original of the Oromos, and also the most original Ethiopian and the proud Ethiopians. Very recently, there have been via Bali, by the Muslims from Bali, they have started recently converted to Islam. Otherwise, maybe you see, it's okay to follow any religion you like. This is a free world. But in Bali, the Oromo politics is mingled with religion and fundamental Islam. If you see, one of the problems we have in Ethiopia now is in Bali. It's not because the people in Bali are Muslims. It is because this fundamental Islamic ideology has been propagated in that area for a very long time. So to make things short, the Borana are the most original, and they are the older among the Oromo brothers, and they are very, very proud Ethiopians.
So then, what is really, if you guys could explain to me, at the core of this issue, is this idea of Greater Oromia, meaning that the issue of land grabbing, or is this an issue of autonomy within the region, meaning that wanting to self-lead and have their own sense of freedom and autonomy in the way that they want to organize? Or is this a sense of wanting to dominate the culture of Ethiopia because they feel like historically they've been dominated, and this is a way to have a piece of the pie, in a sense of? Or is there something else that I'm missing that you guys can explain to me? And if Ephrem could start this.
Yeah, so the Oromo question, this $1 million question, the Oromo question, or the Oromo people's question, as some say, there is no unanimous listing of shopping list of the Oromo questions. Some say 5, some say 6, some say 2, some say 3. Even among the elites of the Oromo hardline politicians. So we can summarize about 5. The first one is the question of Afan, of the language of Afan Oromo. I just said, I call it Oromefa. Afan Oromo means the language of the Oromos. Afan Oromo, you don't call English the language of the English people. You don't say that, right? It's an English. Whoever speaks English can speak it. So I call it Oromefa. I mean, that means Orominya, or you say Amarinya. You don't say Amarinya, Yamara or Kwankwa. So this is a deliberate political decision, by the way, because when they say of any person who speaks Amarinya, Amharic, they call him Afan Amara. He speaks Afan Amara, but that is the language of the Amara. So if you speak Amharic, then it means you must be Amhara. So this is a question. That's the first question that they talk about. The second one is about Finfinne, Magala Guddo, the big city. The third one may be about Abba Biyuma, about having to be Yagar Balabit. So they say the Oromos are not governing themselves for a long time. They need to govern themselves, and whoever lives in the territory of the Oromo people is a guest. That's not his land. That's not his home. It means if you are born in Nazareth or Shashamane or Zuwai, and if your family speak a different language, that's not your home. That is the most racist, that is the most apartheid ideology we have ever seen in the continent of Africa. This has been perpetuated by the Ethiopian government, and it's really a miracle that our country still exists after 30 years of this apartheid-like government system we have in Ethiopia. This is a crime in some countries in Africa. For example, if you go to Ghana, or today's Rwanda, they have learned their own ways, and they don't mention who is from which tribe, or they don't divide the country among ethnic lines. This has been a hidden bomb for the last 30 years, and we still thank God that there is a country called Ethiopia in East Africa. So this is one of the questions they have, and there are some that can be derived from these questions. As I told you, there is no unanimous shopping list of the Oromo questions. The major one that pushed us to use for today's discussion is Islamic Oromo. And they say Islamic or by Islamic Oromo means if you are Oromo, you must be a Muslim. There is no Christian Oromo. And one of my family members, and he was a leading Oromo politician some 50, 60 years ago. He was one of the founders of Mech and Tulama, and he was imprisoned during the military regime at the Derg time. And he was also exiled during the Janhoy time. And I met him once after he was released from prison. He only lived a year after he was released from prison. He was old and sick, and he told me that the people in the prison, they say, "Do you speak the language of Islam?" It means they mean, "Do you speak Oromefa?" So they equate Oromo with Islam. If you are Oromo, you must be a Muslim. That's why our own Orthodox Oromos are not allowed to live in Bali and RC and other areas. They just wait for any good moment to wipe them out of that area, because they will never accept you as an Oromo, especially as an Oromo Orthodox. They will never allow you to do that. And just if you see the historical times when the governments in Ethiopia are weak, then you will have some kind of attacks on our churches. In the 70s, the Somali government invaded Ethiopia. Then the Muslims in Bali rose against the Christians. During the 1991 change, when EPRDF took Menelik's palace, there was unrest in the country. Christians were attacked in Bali, RC, and Harare and other areas. So whenever the government weakens, the first people who are going to be attacked are the Orthodox. So these are the kind of questions they have. They never tell you that there is a political Islam, an Islamic party, an Oromo Islamic parties that want to build their own state in Ethiopia, just devoid of any Christian in their land. So that's one of the questions they have, Hiot. I don't know if you get the list.
Yeah, I got the list. So part of that list is what's causing these violence outbreaks, right? So if this has been happening since the 1970s, why are we surprised now when it's gaining more momentum? Because any movement, as we know, if it still exists, most of the time it's gonna grow and expand, right? So why are we surprised that if we've been seeing these outbreaks since the 70s, that now we see really openly telling people to go kill people on social media, like we've been seeing, having a media network like OMN preaching hate, and like you said, Kesis, the synonymity of Oromo and Islam, right? Why are we surprised when that happens? Diakon Henok, if you can answer that question for me.
I don't think we should be. If we are, again, it's because we haven't been paying attention and studying these issues. I mentioned earlier Marxism, and I didn't do it lightly. And I know maybe a lot of folks in the Western audience may be slightly displeased when I say this, but I think it should be no surprise. One of the shopping list items that Malaka Edom mentioned has to do with property rights. And again, that seed of Marxism is very much against property rights. It's great, people get excited. We still have Churchill Road in Addis Ababa, but where are the property rights protections for, as he said, people born in that place? It'd be one thing if it was a different country or an independent state, but this is a subdivision. The federalism that we have, this ethno-linguistic pseudo-federalism, is supposed to be still within the larger country of Ethiopia. And so we're missing the sort of basic common law property rights that Britain and a lot of her colonies used to have. And we need to focus on ridding ourselves of this hatred of those property rights, because that's how minorities in those regions, as our brother Diakon Ephrem mentioned, not necessarily writ large in the country, but that's how we protect minorities the most, is by having a proper rule of law, a proper set of property rights that everybody in the country knows each region is going to abide by. It's fine if things are conducted in Oromifa, as our father said to us earlier, but the property rights of those minorities, whomever they be, whatever religious affiliation, whatever language they speak in their home, those property rights in each of those regions need to be protected. And I mentioned it earlier, and Kesis did as well. He mentioned how the Borana are the big brothers who do the blessings. Now, the important thing about this is another ideology that a lot of the Western audience has been subject to, is this idea called postmodernism. And a lot of people, subtly, they don't understand. It's in the music, it's in the philosophy, it's in the history, it's in major state universities that people attend. And the basic premise of postmodernism, for those who don't know it as a philosophy, is that everyone has their own truth. Everything is relative. Everyone has their own truth. And one of the dangerous things about that is you don't see and distinguish between, as he said, this kind of political, militant Islam, which is different from the beautiful Sunni and Sufi Islam, which has been in Ethiopia since the beginning, since the first Hajj, when Muhammad's people were getting persecuted, and the Ethiopian Najashi or Nagash presented them an opportunity to be safe once they read from their holy book, and they read a chapter of Our Lady Maria. And it said that he had a tear in his eye when he heard this chapter, and he protected them at that time. And there have been positive relations from Islam's inception. So we have to be able to distinguish and treat these as different things. Another thing is, if you want to pretend that Islam is somehow more indigenous to Oromo speakers than Orthodox Christianity, it's false. Number one, again, as I mentioned, this kind of separatist versus nationalist, you will see a lot of Oromo speakers in Shoa who are predominantly Orthodox Christian. And those people are not going to want to tear up the country and have warfare and split up and not protect minorities' property rights. You don't see it, right? But if we want to be honest, even Islam, as we say, comes from the Middle East, which they claim that other ethnic groups of Ethiopia are not actually indigenous, but they come from the Middle East. Well, Islam is very traceably and evidentially from the Middle East. But we know what is the more indigenous religion that he said earlier is the big brother, that they do the mirqat, the blessing in the Gadda system. Does not come from an Islamic sheikh. It comes from the religious leaders of the Mudda. It comes from the religious leaders within Waqe Fanna. And so if someone wants to literally have every aspect of their life be governed exclusively by Oromo culture, they have to abandon Islam and Orthodox Christianity and only believe in the Waqe Fanna religion. And we frankly don't see that happening. Some of them try to do the thing called syncretism, where they want to celebrate both that religion and Islam or Orthodox Christianity and that. Now, frankly, again, this is impolite to some people, but I have to say it. Those things have tension. They're ultimately different religions. They're ultimately different worldviews. And not everything matches up. You might be able to point to one thing, oh, one God here, one God there. But there are going to be tensions. There are going to be differences of dogma and teaching. And so I would encourage people to study these various forms of the religion and take it seriously while they're digesting unintentionally the Western religion of postmodernism.
Yeah. Speaking of terminology, my question next would be, we've been talking about a lot about terminology as from what I've been listening to. One core issue that we see, or the debates even within those that are being the victims, which are basically mostly the Orthodox Ethiopians in Ethiopia, or in the region of Oromia for now, terminology has become debatable. Like what, for example, like I'm gonna try to put this in two questions so both of you could answer. The first thing is, are we ready to call it genocide, or there are other brothers and sisters that would say this is just a looming genocide? So is there a difference between, because terminology is very powerful as we know, and the term genocide, even though there's always been genocide in the history of humanity since the beginning in various history, the term has only started being used after the 20th century, especially after World War II with Hitler, and then in various places like Armenia, Albania, and then of course in Rwanda in Africa. The term is now more I don't want to say popular, but infamously powerful. It's there. So are we ready to call what's going on right now? When we say genocide, is it only about the amount of numbers that have died, or when is it proper to call it's genocide, or is just what's going on right now in Ethiopia just a looming genocide? Two, how should we understand what's going on right now? What's happening right now? Again, when it comes back to terminology, Malak Edom, you've shared on Facebook, I think it was yesterday, the 2007 census, where it shows there are this is 2007, about 8 million Orthodox in Oromia region that are Oromo, both men and women, and then there are 12 million Muslims in Oromia region. And I had this debate with one of my sister's friends today, where terminology, we have to be careful with terminology. We can't say Muslim Oromos are killing us, right? If we say that, we're saying 12 million people, basically, at least from what 2007 census is saying, we're saying we're saying that 12 million people are our enemy. So when it comes to terminology, how should we understand what's going on? Basically, again, to refer back to Rwanda, I don't want to say it was easy. Of course, in any kind of genocide, it can never be easy to articulate or to understand, but it's completely opposite to what we're facing right now, because in Rwanda, it was Hutu and Tutsis, and then there are the moderate Hutu that also became a victim because they wanted to protect their Tutsi brothers, but it was all religions that were dying, Catholic, Protestant, all of them were victims just because they were Tutsi or moderate Hutu. When we come to Ethiopia, they hide under ethnicity, but we have now realized that it's not their problem. Those out doing these, the perpetrators, the ones carrying these genocide, their problem is with the Orthodox Church, right? Even starting from Hachalu Hundessa, who's an Orthodox Haile Gabriel, and there was this article that came out where I think they were from Arsi. They came to the burial of it's on the screen, where they went to. Let me just read it. It says the importance of religion was moreover noticeable during Hachalu Hundessa funeral, when Muslim Oromo and Bali expressed surprise that he was buried in an Orthodox church, saying, "We thought he was Oromo," reflecting their view that Orthodox Christianity is equated to Amhara. So we have this problem not only on their side, but even in our own side, when we terminalize or when we try to explain what's going on in Ethiopia, what kind of words should we be using? Let's start with are we ready to call it genocide or looming genocide? Let's start with Malak Edom, right?
Okay, this is not an election time. This is not an election for presidency where one group says it's time to call so-and-so has become president of USA. So this is a grave matter that we have at hand. So I don't want to say this or that, but what do the people who have the authority to say this or that have said? I think I tried to show you, if still our technicians show us the what a minority right says. So these are one of the things that makes a genocide a book example genocide to be committed in different countries. So there is no genocide without the help from the government officials. You can't commit genocide without a government. So in Ethiopia, the people in the higher offices in Oromia region has been part of these atrocities. One of the women has been sacked from her position a couple of days ago. She was a mayor of Shashamene. She was deputy president. I don't know if you say that like that of the Oromia region. And she was the one of the people around the prime minister. She was accused of helping the atrocities in Shashamene. She was one of the organizers here in the U.S. and also back home. So there is no genocide without the help from a government. The security apparatus of the Oromia region has been part and parcel of this problem. I don't know. Deacon Henok, you can translate for us what the Prime Minister said. I will just show you a video, and we can translate that to English.
እዚህ ያላችሁ ታሰረብን ያላችሁ ሰዎች ፓርቲዎቻችሁ ሰላማዊ ከሆኑ ብልጽግና እንዳልኩት ሰላማዊ ከሆነ ማን ነው ሀገር እያተራመሰ ያለው ታዲያ? ሰይጣን ነው ከሰማይ ላይ ዱብ እያለ የወረደ ህዝቡ እያጋደለ ያለው? መቼስ ሐሳብ አይደለም፣ ሰው ታርዶ እያየን ነው። ሐሳብ አይደለም፣ ሀብት ወድሞ እያየን ነው። ይሄን የሚያደርገው ብልጽግና ውስጥ የተሰገሰገ ሌባና ሰሞኑን ብልጽግናዎች ጋር ስብሰባ ነበረኝ ከራሴ ፓርቲ አመራሮች ጋር እና በጣም በርካታ ሰዎች አስረናል። ከንቲባ፣ አስተዳዳሪ፣ በጣም ብዙ የታሰረ ያለው ይቀጥላል። አሁን በዚህ ጉዳይ ውስጥ እጁ ያለበት የትኛውም አመራር ይታሰራል፣ ይጠየቃል በህግ።
Deacon Henok, briefly translate for us.
ከይቅርታ ጋር በኔ በኩል አይሰማም ነበር።
Okay, so he was saying, the Prime Minister was saying they have imprisoned a lot of government officials in these areas because they were part of the atrocities committed against Christians in eastern Oromia region. So one of the things that we call this, at least it has an element of a genocide, is because the government officials have been in the atrocities. The other one was premeditated. If you go to the Nazi Germany, when you call the Nazis were Germans, but all Germans were not Nazis. So the people who are committing this are the Oromo youth, organized by politicians, helped by the government people. So you see all the elements of the genocide in these atrocities that we have seen for the last 2 months, Deacon Ephrem.
Yeah, go ahead, Henok.
Yeah, so I think that's a good point. For me, I kind of I saw you put two kind of distinct categories. Is it a genocide now, or is it a looming genocide? I want to make two categories myself, right? So this term, as you said, is a 20th century term. It comes about from these groups like the League of Nations and the United Nations coming up, and these kind of international bodies getting together, trying to form law in what is the fact or the actuality of global anarchy, meaning that we do not have a world government. And so trying to come up with some semblance of the law. Now, I can answer your question, but I'm also going to put a kind of an aside, right? I'm a person who believes very firmly in the sovereignty of the nation states. And frankly, the League of Nations, which was the original formulation, and later the United Nations, I don't think they're our friends. I really don't. And so I would personally use different terminology. But as it has been defined in the 20th century, as it has been constructed by these very known neutral parties, as Malaka Edo mentioned, it is very much so, arguably genocide or looming genocide. Now, the question is, what is the scope that we're looking at? When we look at the scope of the, I said, pseudo-ethno-linguistic federalism that we have within the scope of the Oromia region, because it is premeditated, because it is intentional, because government people have been arrested under suspicion for being involved in these matters, clearly it matches that definition on that level. Now, the difference is that on a federal level, we don't necessarily see the prime minister himself, enacting these things. Like, for example, when we enact Godwin's law, talking about the Nazis, right? It's Hitler in a very top-down fashion doing these things. We don't see Prime Minister Abiy on the front lines directly doing these type of things, although definitely there are some conspiracy theorists who have thrown ideas like that in the kind of general debate, which I think brings the general debate down. So I think in the sense of a national level, we would say it's looming under the definitions as they've been presented here. And in the Oromia region, we could say that it's actual and it's ongoing. And the fear that it would spread to a larger scale, so that it's both actual and right now, with the threat of it being looming as well. And I personally, like I said, I don't trust the UN, the League of Nations. They weren't exactly our friends in World War II and other occasions. And so I would say that we can say that these are militant politicians who are a minority group. As Malaka Edo mentioned, it's not all the people of these people who identify in this way, but certain people who identify in the ways that we have been talking about are militant politicians whose number one goal is getting rid of the Orthodox Church, destroying her in some sense, shape, way, or form. And they believe that by doing that, they'll attack Ethiopianness itself. Because again, and this is a slightly impolite truth, right, in a multicultural society, but while Catholic Christianity, Protestant Christianity, and the various forms, like I said, Sunni Islam and Sufi Islam, while these are all valid forms and expressions of Ethiopian identity, even the Prime Minister himself, who is not a self-identified Orthodox Christian, when referring to our history and our past, has said, there is nothing more Ethiopian than the institution of the Ethiopian Orthodox Church in terms of artwork, history, and connection to the state as it was 50 years ago and for the majority of our history.
If I could jump in here, as you've showed us on the video that the Prime Minister himself has admitted that his own party members are part of this crime, right? Seidom, does this give you some kind of comfort that for him to admit and promise to continue to do this work, or how does this look like for us in the long run when we're talking about the safety of minorities and the safety of our church and as an entity, as a nation? How do we move forward knowing that part of the leading party members are responsible for this crime?
For me, a government starts from the Kabali. So if one of the officials at Kabali level commits a crime, I take the government. That government should be accountable for that crime. So if you go up the chain, up until the president of the Oromia region, these people are accountable for the crimes that are committed against the Christians and the minorities who are non-Oromo speaking Ethiopians. So far the Chafe, I mean the Senate of the Oromia region has had a meeting, and they were discussing about the situation, what has happened in the eastern region of Oromia. When they finished their discussions and meetings, the marathon meetings, they didn't even dare to mention that people, Orthodox people, have been brutally attacked, killed, vandalized, and displaced from their villages. So for me, as an Orthodox and as an Orthodox whose family speak Oromefa, I don't think the Orthodox people in Oromia region has been considered as legal citizens in the Oromia region. So I don't want to mention what the federal government is gonna do, but for now, the president of the Oromia region has been at many defaults in the way he speaks about the other people who are not Oromo speaking people. So in one of the leaked audio tapes we have received, and we have been discussing about in Amharic for a couple of days now, the president himself, I don't think he has this moral authority now to govern the region. And unless I see that the people who were responsible for committing these crimes are imprisoned, unless the people who are displaced from their homes are returning back to their homes, unless the people who lost all their belongings are compensated, I don't think the Oromia regional government is up to the task of safeguarding the safety of the Orthodox community and also non-Oromo speaking Ethiopians youth.
Okay. Diakon Henok, do you want to add on to this?
Yeah, again, we are talking about quite dark subjects, and so I just wanted to share with you some of the humor that I had seen folks talking about. This President Shimadlis that Malaka Edom is talking about, in very clear and explicit language, talked about how they wanted to have a demographic change in Addis Ababa, or in, as they call it, Finfinne, and to try to effect some of the political motives through subterfuge, through kind of this cadre mentality, again, which I think is remnants of some of these past regimes that have taken over since the monarchy. And it's very alarming. But, you know, one of the kind of brief minutes of joy I received was when somebody on the internet said that they wished that they could have, between lovers or spouses, the level of explicitness and clarity that this person showed in his hatred. They wish that they could show that in their own love life. I mean, it was just very blatant, and I hope someone else takes, you know, the venture. I've got a lot of translations on my own, so I hope someone else takes the venture of translating that for the masses, so that they can see just how blatant this level of corruption is. Like Malakaido mentioned, at such a high level. You know, this is no minor authority, right? This is a very high-ranking member of the current regime.
Yeah, Henok, just to add one point, in the Oromia region, the governing party, if you see the representation of the Orthodox Christians in their party, it is the Orthodox are almost non-existent. You cannot hold a big office in Oromia region if you are Orthodox. You should otherwise convert either to Islam or Protestantism. Even the current president, Shimalis himself, has been unorthodox. The mayor of Addis Ababa, now he was unorthodox. And all officials you see are either Islam or Protestant. The Protestant were basically they were Orthodox, and they want to get an office position. They should convert or just be one of the underdogs in the political arena of the Oromia region. That's a very sad reality.
Oh, that's unfortunate. Just wondering, would any of you know the percentage of the Orthodox population within Oromia? I know that recent statistics I heard, the population of non-Oromo and Orthodox was about 10 million right now within Oromia region. So I was just wondering if there was a kind of specific number to the Orthodox so we could better understand what that representation is looking like.
Yeah, I posted one article yesterday, and Deacon Ephrem can he was mentioning it, and you can repeat that statistics, Deacon Ephrem.
Yeah, we just mentioned this is 2007, so it might be a bit different, but not in a big way. But in 2007, according to 2007, there are about 8 million, more than 8 million Orthodox, and Muslim side we have 12 million.
Oh, that's amazing. So now that we're kind of in an argument to the definition of genocide as it was put out by the UN, we know that part of that characteristics or the campaign of genocide is that to blame the victims, right? To make so that the victims are on their defense and having to provide the burden of proof, that being left on the victims. And also we see that right now where the people that are screaming the loudest are the perpetrators. And they've also taken advantage of the fact that they were here first. In a sense, they were on the international media first. So they've been able to share their supposed grievance or whatever their issue might be. So right now it seems like we're just on defense, trying to defend what, like trying to find the opposite of what they're trying to say, in a sense of finding the truth and the historical facts of it. But it doesn't seem like we're taking our own political agenda and our own stance out to public. And do you think we'll be able to get to that point where we break free of having to defend ourselves and having to defend the victims that are dying and have no voice right now, really can't come here and have this conversation with us, right? Because they're in dire situation. What does it look like for us moving forward to get out of the defensive, also be able to break through and really talk about what's happening in Ethiopia without the perpetrators always taking away the voice and the history and everything else along with it?
Deacon Henok, you can start.
Yeah, so it's a very important question. I think one of the things we have to do is when we find ourselves in these dialogues and we end up being on different sides of the debate, one of the things we to do is actively listen to the other side and see what they have to say. It doesn't mean if they tell us the sky is purple, we're going to agree that the sky is purple. If we have a set of facts that we know and can prove and provide evidence for, we're going to go back and we can have some back and forth dialogue. But for example, a lot of, as I said, the history that I think another side tries to present revolves around Emperor Menelik II. And so I recently translated a document of his that he wrote to Abba Jafar II. And it was about a kind of slave trade that was going on. And Abba Jafar II is obviously self-identified Oromo speaker. And at the time, he was, capturing some people from the Janjiro region, which is towards the east of where he was in Jimma. And what's going on within the letter that I translated, as you see, first of all, Emperor Menelik himself is, as we've said, thoroughly mixed himself with Cushitic and Semitic. So you can't call him some Arab Semitic invader. It just doesn't work. Second of all, within the Amharic, what's very fascinating is he considers Shoa and Gondar to be so different that he says in the letter, hey, Abba Jafar, if you and Janjiro can't get along, why don't you look at the Shoans in my court and the Gondareoch? Look at how the Shoans and the Gondareoch are getting along. And why can't you all get along and treat this person with human dignity? Why can't you let anyone who is poor sleep wherever they want to sleep? Why are you trying to split people up by ethnicities? Am I trying to paint Emperor Menelik II as a cartoon hero? No. He was a military commander. He fought in wars. And I'm sure there were a lot of war crimes and atrocities within that. But he's neither a cartoon villain nor a cartoon hero. As I said, before a lot of the recent stuff, I would have been the #1 critic of Emperor Menelik. When everyone is singing, Teddy Afro's song glorifying him, I would say, what about this? But when people try to paint him as a sort of Ethiopian Hitler or Mussolini, I'll say, hold on. He was not that bad. You see him defending the dignity of the human beings in Janjiro, who at various times were open to human sacrifice, were having people with leprosy being put to death by people in charge of the region. And he was declaring that one of these regional heads, Abba Jafar, did not have the authority to capture these people. And again, emphasizing the basic human dignity of various groups throughout all of the Ethiopian nation state. And so I think we need to be able to listen to the other side, actively listen to what are their grievances, what is the shopping list, as Malaka Edom mentioned, and see where can we reach you on. Already in process now, whether we call it Afan Oromo or whether we call it Oromifa or Orominya, it's in process to becoming one of the working languages of Ethiopia. That was one of the demands. It's in process. We're working on it. And hopefully, with God, Godspeed, hopefully it's there soon. I would love to retain knowledge of this language. This is all of our language. Malaka Edom doesn't shy away from it. I've learned spiritual songs in the Oromo language. I read the chapter of Galatians for people publicly in the Oromo language. I would love nothing more than to study Oromo history. Now I would poke back at people because I would write it not necessarily in Kube, but in our Ge'ez Fidel. But that's a discussion maybe and an argument for another day. But we try to listen to what kind of legitimate grievances they have and incorporate them where they are, but also call out where the picture does not meet that they're trying to paint.
Thank you. Sedom, if you could add on.
So what's the solution? What should we do? Where are we now? We are far behind. We have the truth, but we are far behind. We are not organized. We are not even aware of the issues, the attacks that has been thrown at us, at our church, and also the Christians in general. So the Ethiopian Orthodox Church has been put to jail without the due process of the law. The historians, the politicians, has been writing for the last 40 years against the church, especially in the West, here in the US and Europe, in Canada, Australia, where have you. So what's there to do? We have a lot of homework that we should do to teach our youngsters what to be an Ethiopian is, what Ethiopia is, what our history is. We speak different languages. We are multi-religious country. We have Islam. We have different local religions, Christianity, of all the sects. So, but we are all Ethiopians. So we should go back to the drawing table and start teaching our kids, our youth, about the Ethiopian history. Unfortunately, what has been written by these pseudo-intellectuals in the West has been all toxic propaganda in the name of history against Ethiopia. So we should go back and check and fact check and put out our own history for the youngsters and for the new generation to choose. Ethiopia is a miraculous country. It's a miracle that this country is still there in the map in East Africa after 3 decades of a government that has been working to dismantle the society along ethnic lines, along religious lines. One of the parties that was ruling the country for over 2 decades, in their proclamations and in their own laws, they said that to undermine the Orthodox Church has been a guarantee for their power in the country. This is no secret. It has been in their documents, and it has been written even in English and published. You can go and check the book by the name Dr. Adebabay, one of the founders of TPLF. So they said to upgrade Islam in Ethiopia, to open all the doors for Islam in Ethiopia, and undermine the Orthodox Christian Church in Ethiopia is a guarantee for others to strive and for the church to take the back seat. So this has been perpetuated for the last 3 decades, but we are still there. Now is the time to go back to the drawing table. Let us tell our history to whoever has a clear conscience, or to listen to us, and let us discuss on whatever accusations that these people has been throwing out our church. For example, you mentioned a letter by the Emperor Menelik about the Janjaro, right, Deacon Henok?
Yes.
So, was Emperor Menelik a pro-slavery? Was he really undermining the other people from the south and the east? Was there really a campaign against the Oromos to dismantle them, to enslave them in Ethiopia? Was there an Oromo state nation in Ethiopia before Menelik? What would have happened if there was no emperor by the name Menelik? The west part of today's Oromia would be maybe in Sudan, or could be a small country like Djibouti. The southern part, Bale, and the Borana will be a Kenya for sure. The eastern part will be Somalia. The only local area that could be in today's Ethiopia would be only Shawa. So if you see it, if I say without any diplomatic words, without any political correctness, Emperor Menelik has done a big favor to the Oromo. And the most educated Oromo politicians, they know it. But they needed an example which they can oppose for the young Oromo people to rally behind them, that they made a Hitler out of Emperor Menelik. So let us go back to the drawing table. Let us speak our history without any political correctness. Yes, I am Oromo. I'm a proud Oromo. I'm a proud Ethiopian. What these people saying, it is not history. It's a mere political propaganda. So let us go back to the drawing table and tell the history as it is.
I love that.
Thank you, Malak Hedom and Diakon Henok. We're going to take a quick break, but before we take a quick break, I just wanted to read just to break off before going to break. One really nice comment I saw. I'm going to gear it towards Diakon Henok so he could translate it. It's geared towards him. It says, Afhach Yohan Kilich. Since you're a linguistic person, can you translate that for us? And we'll take one break.
Yeah, you can either say sweet or savory child.
Well, they didn't say Henok, so we don't know who the Lidge is, but maybe we'll answer it when we come back.
አደባባይ ሚዲያ ለወገንተኝነት ጀርባውን የሰጠ ጊዜያዊ ጥቅምን አምቢኝ ብሎ የዘመመን ሊያቀና እውነትና እውቀትን አስከትሎ ኢኮኖሚያዊና መንፈሳዊ መረጃዎችን እንካችሁ ይላል። ትኩስ ዜናዎች፣ ዘጋቢ ፊልሞች፣ ጥልቅ ትንታኔዎች በአደባባይ ሚዲያ ይቀርባሉ። ራእያችን ጊዜውን ያማከለና ዘመኑን የዋጀ በእውነት የነጠሩ መረጃዎችን በእውቀት ደግፎ ለሀገራችን ብሎም ለዓለም ሕዝብ ማዳረስ ነው። አድሬሳችን አደባባይ ኢንፎ ሚዲያ @gmail.com፣ በዌብሳይታችን www.adebabai.com። ያግኙን፣ ይርዱን። የሁላችንም ስለሆነች ኢትዮጵያ በአደባባይ እንዘግባለን።
Adebabay Media kan hunduma keenya kan taate waa'ee Itoophiyaa Adebabay irratti ni gabaasna. Adebabayin kan hundumaati. kan hunduma keenya kan taate waa'ee Itoophiyaa Adebabay irratti ni gabaasna. Peejii Feesbuukii Adebabay Miidiyaaf chaanaalii yuutuubii keenya irratti nu hordofaa. Adebabay Miidiyaa.
Welcome back, everyone. Thank you for all of us that have been joining us throughout our conversation today on is genocide happening in Ethiopia, and we've been discussing on current issues with Malake Edom, Kesis Ephrem, and our brother Diakon Henok, Elias from California. Welcome back again. We've been talking about a lot of the problems for the past hour now. Let's talk about some solutions. Malake Edom, you did start us off a little bit on the solutions before we took a break, and one important thing that you mentioned is educating our kids, or the importance of knowing our history. For example, as immediately King Menelik, both Diakon Henok and Malake Edom both mentioned that no one is saying that he's a saint, but he is a figure that actually not only, if we only look at towards the tribe of Oromia, he's someone that actually could be named as a king or leader that favored the Oromia region or the people of Oromia. So what I wanted to, one of the solutions that I wanted to focus on is, we've talked a little bit on the political side, the government side, which is rightfully correct. As Ethiopian Orthodox Tohado fellows, right now in this conversation, we have our sister Hiwat from the parish, from Mimenan, from the parishioners, from the believers. And we have two deacons here, and then we have our Malake Edom, a father, a Kesis, a priest. So as Ethiopian Orthodox Tohado faithfuls, Ethiopians that are going through this, where our brothers and sisters are being slaughtered because of their faith, what should be the solution? As first, one thing that I've always been irritated with is most of us always want the synod to decide, to have all the solutions. All the posts that we mention on Facebook is, why did Abuna Kale not say anything? Why hasn't the patriarch spoke? Or why did the Holy Synod did not do this? We don't see that. What about us? What about me? Right? So as Ethiopian Orthodox Tohado servants, fellows, believers, followers, and also an Ethiopian citizen, what should be our take on this? What should be the next step? What should we do on to be part of this voice and to be part of this battle against basically evil? Malake Edom, let's start with you again.
I started the last one. Let me give now to Deacon Henok. You may go.
So there are a few things that we can do already. Participating as a host, what you're doing, the folks who are watching and listening to us at home, that is one preliminary step. in our church, I know you mentioned you don't want to rely too much on them, but an essential thing is that the Holy Synod is our ultimate guide, so we need to look at them. I have been so proud of our bishops who we see preaching in Oromifa. You know, I've heard of folks doing Oromifa Kadase or liturgy in various places. I would like to see people further dedicate themselves to all of our Abennet or our traditional school. I would like to start seeing people who are knowledgeable students. I'm far from it, but I know there are many Kene or Ge'ez poetry students and teachers. I would love for them to convert the Kene or the poetry into Oromifa. I would love for, to this day, it's very sad, everyone with their lips pays lip service to Qudus Yared of Aksum or Holy Jared of Aksum, but to this day I've never seen an Amharic translation, let alone an Oromifa translation of his 4 books, of the Digwa, of the Mi'raf, of the Zimmari, and the Mawasa'it. So I'd love to see people do that. Those who pursue further education in Bluyat and Hadith and the Old Testament and New Testament, I would love for them to, again, present all of this, because I want to rid everyone of their excuse. The feelings of our Oromo identifying brothers and sisters that I think are leading to some of these clashes is that they feel that their voice has been stifled. And I want to take away every single legitimate excuse so that we see the people who are still around and complaining. Those are the people who are seeking the destruction of the Orthodox Church. Those are the people seeking the destruction of the Ethiopian nation state, as it's been said in many other platforms as well. The Balkanization or the turning of Ethiopia into Yugoslavia, the way that Malaka Edom presented it earlier, without Emperor Menelik and the formation of the national state as we know it. For the folks who don't know, they can go and read Baharuzode's modern nation state of Ethiopia text to see exactly, how that formed, how it could have easily went to Sudan and Kenya and Somalia and Djibouti, all of our neighbors in the region of the Horn of Africa and North Africa and East Africa writ large. So again, we can pursue the kind of the language and present it to all of the people in the community to separate the people who identify in one way versus the people who are active and militant politicians against the Orthodox religion, against Ethiopia itself as a nation state, because we need to be able to separate those. To give yet again another historic example, amongst Tigrayan people or people who speak Tigrinya, one of the kind of greats that they look to see themselves within history is Emperor Johannes. When you explore Emperor Johannes himself, you dig through, you see a lot of people of Tambain, these local rulers. But where does he claim his Solomonic lineage? Whether you believe in that or not, he claims it from the Gondarean line. And even him, who could have made Tigrinya a national language, he viewed the people of Ethiopia. And he didn't say this person is Amhara, this person is this, that, and the third. He said most people are functionally using and speak Amharic. I do as well. And he said, I'm not going to mess with the national language. Amharic is here. It's a national language. We're using it. And he worked together for one Ethiopian nation state. Again, as just one more example of somebody who's not ethnically pure and who doesn't have a linguistic agenda of pushing only his specific subculture, 5-6% of the population, upon everything else. And again, I want to re-emphasize what Malaka Edom said before we were here. The thing that used to make me the saddest about these tiny members of TPLF who are not representative of the beautiful people of Tigray is that even in their names, Zenawi means the evangelist. Aragawi is representative of Zamikaela Aragawi, one of the beautiful 9 saints who founded so many monasteries in the north. They're carrying Orthodox names even within their culture. And so that type of thing made me sad. So we need to, dig into our own culture, whatever it may be, reach out to the multi-plural cultures that we see and try to constantly incorporate that within the church, the Orthodox Church's traditional schools of Kadasi, Akwakwam, Digwa, and Mazayif, all of them, the scriptures, the Eucharistic liturgies, the non-Eucharistic liturgies, every tradition we have, we should try to share it with every culture. We should be evangelizing and incorporating everybody's culture so that they know that their culture is appreciated. But ultimately, we have to understand, if you dig back, the ancient Aksumites used to worship the sun. We're not going to come back here today
and begin worshiping the sun. We've chosen Orthodox Christianity as our religion. And so even though that may be a part of, our culture in the deep past, and we like having these obelisks from Aksum in our home and things like that for representative of history, we have to know that our culture is Orthodox Christianity. We've chosen that. And you're not going to choose every aspect of every culture. It's a buffet. Ethiopia is a beautiful buffet. We can love to speak the Oromo language. We can love to eat Gurage food. We can love to have a wonderful Orthodox Christian religion, and whatever other combo that people want to assemble.
You answered it very well. Thank you so much, Diakon Henok. You answered it beautifully and powerfully. But just to reiterate, or the context of my question, I didn't mean to say, or I didn't say that we shouldn't rely on the Holy Synod, but I meant let's stop. You answered it very well. Like, you've already given us the homework that we should be doing now, with like this, starting from translating these very important books. But we shouldn't blame. That's what I wanted to emphasize is a lot of times we tend to have the culture of just waiting from the leaders only, or just from the Holy Synod. One thing I want to mention here, our fathers, just like you said, even when we speak on with the youth organizations, you've been working with us, and you know this, where when we hold these EOTC conferences here, our fathers that have never even been to the United States hear our stories, right? They know our issues. They have seen our servants. And how do I know that? And why? Like, I was touched on this. If you guys remember, during the Lent season, right when COVID hit, there was a 1 month full long held subai, or prayer on national television, along with sermons that were being delivered in different languages, and one of it was English. So that would have never happened if our fathers wouldn't know that we actually exist here in the United States. There are thousands, if not millions, of Orthodox faithfuls that speak English as their first language. So I saw that as a sign that the Holy Synod is actually listening to us. They adhere to our problems. They know our issues. And if we actually stand and work, we could see more. We could be, I don't want to say their strength, but we could help them, enlighten them on the issues. If they don't know our problems or the issues that we have, they wouldn't act. And when it comes to Ethiopia, of course, they're there and they understand the issue. But when they see their children get up and do the work, is when our fathers will also adhere and have that, that enlightenment or strength to help us on our issues. That's what I wanted to mean on when to saying we relying on the Holy Synod. We should always rely, but let's stop the blame, the blaming the blame game, and let's start work like let's start doing the work, like you said, Diakon. Going to Malakedo.
Let me throw the same question at Hewitt, if I may. It's not just to flip the table at you, but what do you think should the solution be, Hewitt? I saw you speaking at a rally in Seattle a couple of weeks ago.
Yes.
What was your prescription? What should we do, Hewitt?
I think for me, the first thing, like Diakon Henok said, is to be able to listen to each other and really know what the issue is and where we could align ourselves with. And that for me that starts with a lot of prayer for my heart and for my eyes and for my ears to be opened. After that, it really is doing the homework that needs to be done. Doing the homework. We cannot no longer say we don't have the resources that we need in a language that we understand. There are many resources in English, translated or otherwise. History, church, anything we could possibly look for, right? And we should actively seek these knowledges, actively educate ourselves, and really be willing to really know what's going on in Ethiopia. Like if I want to stand here and support the Black Lives Matter because a Black person should not die, I should care just as much when my brothers and sisters are being slaughtered on the streets in their homes, and not being able to live out the life that they choose to. and to really understand that the people that are perpetrating these are the ones that have left Ethiopia for the same situations that has driven them out of the country, right? So for me, I've taken the homework on myself and really, really studied the history of Ethiopia and what the problems are. And after that, it's politically being active, meaning that not to say let's pick a political party or anything like that, but knowing that human beings are being killed and I should care. And that might be political, that might be a human issue. But for me, it's a human issue. I know that mostly when we're talking about within the Ethiopian context, that could quickly become a political issue. But when someone is dying, I don't have the luxury anymore to say, የኢትዮጵያ ፖለቲካ ነው አይመለከተኝም, or like, you know, my mom and my dad give me like the wrong information all the time, so I'm tired of hearing it. We don't have that luxury anymore, because tomorrow what I'm really terrified of is, I don't have kids right now, but tomorrow when I have kids, when my kids ask me, when these things happen in Ethiopia, what did you do? I want to be able to have an answer for that. And that means for me really studying, praying, being actively participating in the conversations that are happening right now, telling the truth as much as I can, and also doing any work that I can and any help I could give to people that are actively raising awareness, and rebuilding the churches, and actually really trying to help right now with money and resources as much as I can. So that's where I am right now. And I will take that question back to you and would like to hear what you have to say.
I wish I don't add anything more, because I can't agree more, guys. Well said, beautifully said. You are the solution. You are in your 20s. You are the solution of whatever problem we have. This is not an Orthodox Islam problem. This is not an Amhara or Oromo problem. This is a human problem. So the issue is the problem of all of us Ethiopians, or all of us Africans, and also anybody who is a world citizen. So if you love humanity, if you love freedom, if you love the pursuit of happiness, as they say, you should be part of the solution for this problem. So always I say there are 4 chapters that we should cover in this problem. The first one is religion. So we had 2 synods for over 20 years. Why? Why did we have 2 synods? Why is our church still attacked from north to south, from east to west? Even here in the diaspora, there is an Oromo Beta Knet in the making. There is a Tigray Beta Knet in the making. There was a Kabat Papas consecrated a month ago. Why is all this happening to our church? What is this special about the Ethiopian Orthodox Church that has been attacked for the last 40, 50 years? Why is all the books written in these days are against the Ethiopian Orthodox Church? Why is this something special about the Ethiopian Orthodox Church? So if we know the answer to these questions, then that is a solution. The Ethiopian Orthodox Church is the pillar and the beacon of freedom in that part of Africa. There is no Ethiopian freedom without the Ethiopian Orthodox Church. I guarantee you. It doesn't mean there are no other religions in Ethiopia. It is a multi-religious country. There is no division amongst ourselves in the country along ethnic or religious lines. We died together, we lived together, and we should live together. But why is the Ethiopian Orthodox Church attacked for the last 50, 60 years, even more? Why did the fascists attack when they first came and landed in the country? Why is our monastery, Debre Libanos, attacked? Why were the monks slaughtered at the fascists? So if you know the answer to these questions, it is part of the solution. The second one is the education system. For the last 30 years, the Ethiopian alphabet, I don't call it Ge'ez alphabet, or I don't call it Amharic alphabet, I call it the Ethiopian alphabet. The Ethiopian alphabet has been under attack for over 30 years. Half of our nation, they don't understand the Ethiopian alphabet. It is maybe the only alphabet in Africa. We are one of the few countries in the world who use their own alphabet. Why is our education system against our own history, against our own heritage? If you know the answer to that, for sure, we have a solution to the problem that is being committed right now. The third one is the media. Look, we have a lot of satellite medias. I can tell you, most of them are against the Ethiopian Orthodox Church, against Ethiopianness, against our unity. Who is funding OMN? Why is OMN like the Radio Rwanda that has been advocating for genocide in Rwanda? They just only closed the offices only a couple of weeks ago. They have had a free ride in the country. They have been in every Oromo-speaking village house and houses. They have been helping the atrocities being committed in the eastern Oromia region. So if we curve that problem, if we put our information to the media, and if we have our own media that can tell what's right and what's wrong, then that's a solution. The third one, the fourth one, the last one is our culture. Okay, this year, we didn't have a Damara in many parts of Oromia. We didn't have a Damara in Bishoftu, only 15 or 20 miles away from Addis. This year's Tmkat has been a hail in many parts of Ethiopia. Many of our Orthodox brothers and sisters, they have not been allowed to celebrate their open air festivals. Why? The Ethiopian culture is basically based on the Ethiopian Christianity in many of the places. So the attack has been in the education system, in the religious system, on medias, on books, on universities. Now they have waged a war against the culture. You can't use any flag you want. You can't use the three-color flag wherever you want. The police themselves, they will confiscate your flag, and they can push you around, even arrest you, and beat you up sometimes. Why? This flag has been a beacon of freedom in many parts of Africa and the other countries where you find black people, even in Latin America. So why is our culture under attack? If we work on these four fronts, we can stand the wars they wage against us, against our Ethiopians, against the Orthodox Church of Ethiopia, and then we can have a future maybe. Otherwise, we are in a serious trouble, guys. So we should work our homework. Then I think we'll have another day for our the kids to have a country to have for our kids. Thank you.
Amen. Yeah, it's really troubling, and I hope we're able to focus on these very four important points that I try to work on in my own individual life and the organizations I'm involved with. One of the things I kind of mentioned that I wanted to flesh out, I mentioned it slightly. I said skin in the game, blood in the game earlier in terms of DNA test. Ultimately, we have to acknowledge that all of us are speaking safely from the diaspora, from Texas, from Tennessee, from the state of Washington, and from California, where I am. So my ultimate solution, in addition to everything Malaka Edom said, is I am making my own plans myself, although I was born in the United States, to try to see, can I find employment back home? Can I take care of whatever financial matters and stuff exists here? And can I put my actual skin in the game? And the reason I say that is everyone calling for violence, for bloodshed, for civil war that I hear in the diaspora, they're doing it from the safety of their homes with the government of the United States. And just as it's well documented that there are a lot of people who are cowards, who hide behind anonymity, who hide behind weird icons and strange things. They say things on Twitter, on Instagram, on TikTok, wherever it may be, that they would never say face to somebody. I think if a lot of us move back to Ethiopia, it'd be very different.
There's an organization called the Free State Project in the United States. And they, for example, said that they all wanted to move to New Hampshire. 20,000 people signed the petition. About 10,000 people had done that. Imagine how many people are Ethiopian in the diaspora in the United States, for one example, but really all over the world. Imagine if all of us said, Ethiopia is at such a crucial point in our lives. We're going to do our very best to finish up, to cross all the T's, dot all our I's that are here, wherever we are in the diaspora, and we're going to move back so that each and every one of us that wants to talk on this subject has the ultimate skin in the game, and we're there face to face. We saw the Prime Minister early on kind of encouraging this with various models of the yellow card and other forms of citizenship being offered up. If there was a dual citizenship, I would have taken it years ago. But the least we can do is try to reach out, get a yellow card if we don't already have it, or for Ethiopian nationals, try to find a way where in mass we can move back and take care of our country, because again, it's really at a tipping point right now, the way that we've seen it.
Thank you, Diakon Henok and Malaka Edom as well. Just to follow up a question on this, and it'll be geared towards Diakon Henok. I want you to start off with this one to bring the Ethiopian American perspective now with the solutions. Even though we will have a full program and discussion on the issues that we've been seeing here with the youth in America, which the amount of hatred and hate that they have been fed. We've seen the incident for example, in Seattle, of the beating down of a pedestrian, a white American pedestrian. And we've seen the Twitters and videos that are coming out, and basically most of them are in their teenagers and early 20s that are perpetrating these hate speech and hate online. And most of them, we could unequivocally really say 100% of them has never even been to Africa, let alone Ethiopia. So when we bring the African American perspective in this, I want you to answer this in two ways. One, what I've realized is, Diakon Henok, you could also adhere to this, where most of us know the problem, but we're very uncomfortable to talk about Ethiopian politics. If you remember with the George Floyd incident, a lot of our brothers and sisters did a lot of protest online and even on the floor with Black Lives Matter, because we are part of that African American history. We are part of that history, and that's great. But when it comes to the Ethiopian, with what's going on in our country, most of us either shy away, or what we see is the other side, worse, they're being fed all this hate. So what should be the solution to here to first, Malaka Edom really beautifully answered it in 4 ways: being educated with religiously, culturally, and with media, culture, just to name all 4: religion, education, media, and culture. What should we do to now reach to the African American or to the Ethiopian American here, and how can we be part of? How can they be, or we as together Ethiopian Americans, be part of this conversation? How can we reach out to these brothers and sisters that already have been, imagine the profile pictures that were changed right after our brother Hachalu's death was the mark of the red mark, which is a sign of blood. And these kids were even calling for killing. So how can we reach out to already those poisoned brothers and sisters that some of them I actually grew up with? I grew up in Minnesota. So let's talk a little bit on that part of the solution.
Agreed. I'd like to piggyback off what our sister Hiwat said earlier, right? It's that we need to focus on defining the narrative in a humanistic way. We're not talking about a few rights here or a few rights there. As Malaka Edom mentioned earlier, we're talking about life itself. We're talking about property rights of minorities within the regions they're in, and life itself. And once that's fulfilled, then the pursuit of happiness, as it's said, right, in the American constitutional tradition. So what we need to do is to paint a picture for folks who are sitting on the fence of how grave the matter are. how many different things are going on. How specifically, as we've mentioned on the show, property rights are being violated. They're not being protected. They're being neglected. The legal term is negligence by the people in charge of those regions, government officials, as well as individuals posing as externally religious Muslims, but who have nothing to do with the proud tradition of peaceful Islam for centuries in Ethiopia. Centuries. And so we have to be able to point them, again, towards the actual facts on the ground. I've had people reach out to me who initially, they were hearing some of these militant politicians and activists, like you've said, and they said, you know what? They related it to the Black Lives Matter movement. I saw the connections. They had a slideshow for me on some social media. It looked pretty. And, I believed it. These people seem like they're in pain. So what we need to do is to not say that it's invalid, that there is pain, that there are feelings, there are grievances. And some of their grievances, frankly, are general grievances of Ethiopians who've been beat up, like we said, by two different regimes over the past 50 years, who've not had the best property rights, who've not had, the best ability to vote and other such matters, who get the internet turned off, who get texting turned off on cell phones. One of the exact things I tell people that they can't fathom when I tell them is, okay, the government owns, again, this is a remnant of Marxism. The government owns cell phones. So when they want to, they could snap their finger and you can't text anymore. A lot of Americans don't even understand that concept. They can't even fathom that happens, because you see T-Mobile, AT&T, Verizon, Sprint, all of these different organizations. And so you can't even fathom what would it be like if the government was the only person who owned cell phones. What if the government was the only one who owned internet production? And so they don't even have any sort of exact picture. It's just these general big picture narratives that they've been painted falsely. So again, there are some people who are ignorant, and there are some people, meaning not in a mean way, but lacking knowledge, whom we could provide knowledge to, and I'm sure that they will act intelligently. And there are other people who are bad actors. They're not working in good faith. They know some of the evidence, and they're twisting it to fit their agenda, as we said earlier, because it fits them. They're not interested in facts. They're interested in trying to create a power vacuum and grabbing that power. So we need to be able to differentiate between people who simply lack knowledge and people who are acting as bad actors, and reach out to our fellow Ethiopian Americans, telling them these kind of very specific and measurable things, and working out with even people we may view as enemies and say, what are your specific and measurable goals? The Oromo question, as Kesis said earlier, and how can we address each and every one in a specific way? And none of them have to do with violently killing people or denying people their property rights.
Thank you so much, Diakon Henok. Well said, both of you. Now, moving on, it kind of flows with this. What are some of the questions that we should ask? Like, we've looked at the solutions, and Malaki Edom, I want to go to you on this one again. What are specific questions? A lot of times we say there are, or they keep telling us that there's the Oromo question, the Amara question, or ethnic-based questions. What are the questions that we should ask as Ethiopians that want to live with harmony and united? What should be some of the questions? As, by the way, one thing, this might be something that we might feel like we could never be done, but just to comment on one ignorant comment that what was his name? Bakala Garba has made about why should the Ethiopian Orthodox Tewahedo Church worry about the unity of Ethiopia, or even the issue of Ethiopia, which is complete utter ignorance. And I'm not even going to go in answering or like I just wanted to throw it out there with the what kind of questions should we ask, or what kind of questions as Ethiopian Orthodox Tewahedo Church leaders or the Holy Synod ask the government? What is the question of the Orthodox, basically, especially we've looked at the past 50 years, right? All the problems. What should be the question that we should ask? I believe, for example, you've already mentioned, Malaki Edom, on where there are countries like Rwanda and Ghana and some other countries that have completely banned ethnic-based politics, or even like the mention of ethnicity in their IDs. Germany, They can't even have the Nazis' slogan is, however, a freedom of speech that they might enjoy. No one could hold the slogan of Nazi because of again what happened in Germany. So, what should be our question to the government? Do you think, Malak Edo?
I think we should face the problem head on. The church should face the problem head on. You can't win this thing with political correctness. You can't win this if you are weak and if you don't put their questions to taste. So whatever questions they have, let us put it to taste. So one of the questions, for example, the Orthodox Church is alien to the Oromo. Let's go back to history and study it. If you study the history of Oromo, the written record of the Oromo people, you find it only in the Ethiopian Orthodox Church. Let's go and check it. Let us put it to taste. Okay, the Ethiopian Orthodox Church is against the Oromo culture. Where do you find the original Oromo culture in Ethiopia? In the Orthodox dominated areas. Do you find it in Bale? Do you find it in Arsi? Or do you find it in Walaga? No, you find it in Shawa, where the Orthodox Church is strong. Where do you find the original Oromo names for centuries? Do you find it by the name Jawar Muhammad? Is that an Oromo name? No. You find the Oromo name in Shawa, in the Orthodox Shawa. So whatever question they have, let us put it to taste. Let us put it to taste and check it out. And if it is wrong, we should ask for forgiveness from whoever is a representative of the Oromo people. But apart from the propaganda, the Ethiopian Orthodox Church has been the area where the Oromo culture is still preserved. They started to celebrate one of the Oromo cultures, even in Addis Ababa, in Finfinne. The Shoa people, we call it Shaggar. I don't know where they brought the Finfinne from. So where do you find that culture? You find it in the Orthodox Shoa. You don't find it in Arsi or on Walaga, or you don't find it in Bali. You find it in Shoa. You go to Dabrazet, Bishoftu, you can see originally when the culture is at the experiment. So let us put their whatever questions they have to taste, and if the church fails to answer that questions, then we can ask for any forgiveness from the Oromo people. So that's the first question. Let us face the problem head on. So Deacon Ephrem, you were trying to excuse the Synod and the Beta Kenneth from the problems we have now. I don't. We are not up to the task. The Beta Kenneth is not up to the task. One father may say something here, or the other bishop might say some here, not unanimously saying and denouncing what has been happening in Ethiopia. Where is our Holy Synod? Where is our Beta Kenneth? What are they doing now? And our Synod didn't denounce what the atrocities has been committed against the Ethiopian Orthodox people in Eastern Walaga, but the other churches, even not the sister churches, the Eastern Orthodox churches, they call it a genocide. It has been happening in Ethiopia. So we are not up to the task. Let me ask you brothers and sisters, are you up to the task to answer the problems we are facing now? This is my homework. I don't take this homework in a group. It is my homework. It is my identity. This is my faith. This is my country. I don't want to take it in a group. It is my homework. So if we take it as a responsibility for any Ethiopian citizen, any Ethiopian Orthodox citizen, any Ethiopian, wherever we live, in Europe or here in the USA, it is our homework that we should and work upon. And we should be up to the task to curb the problem we are facing now.
Can we also add on, maybe this is too much emphasizing it, or maybe we can't do it now, especially as you, Malakedo, mentioned, we have failed, yes, as a church, at least till today, that we our Holy Synod have not mentioned this as or given their comment on this on genocide happening in Ethiopia or speaking for the victims. But as an entity, as an Ethiopian Orthodox Tewahedo entity, this Holy Synod, can we or can the Holy Synod ask the government for the ban of ethnic-based politics? From the way I see it, I feel like we're going in circle of the same problems again and again. In the United States, we're politics and the way it's built is different, and we're not there yet. But in the United States, you have, for example, an organization called NAACP. They're a huge, strong organization that stands for the rights of African Americans, but they're not a political-based organization that's trying to hold power. They're just an organization. So since we are the victim, since the Ethiopian Orthodox Tewahedo Church is the victim right now, don't we have a right to ask, to make the fundamental question of we need the ban of ethnic-based politics? People could have their own political organizations based on their ideology, but to base it on ethnicity has become an ongoing problem for the church. Can we ask that question? As do you think? I mean, I know it doesn't start from there. At least it starts from actually voicing our voice, our fathers. But unfortunately, we have failed to do that again and again. But can that be part of the question as well, Manaki?
That's what facing head-on means. So you can't beg your freedom from any government, whichever country you live in. Nobody begs for a freedom from their governments. You own it. That is your natural right. So the church cannot beg any government, any form of government, to give her the freedoms that she owns, that's God-given reality. So this federalism, the along ethnic lines, is against our teaching. It's against our teaching. Unfortunately, the church succumbs to this federalism along ethnic lines, along language lines. Now we are in the problem. If we look for any solution, we should start from within. We are in the problem, and we are becoming really becoming part of the problem.
Thank you. Henok? John.
Yeah, I would like to agree with you all in terms of, for me, I think pretty much, we could go through them all, but pretty much for me, whatever people are calling human rights, they pretty much come from a strong common law property rights tradition. So I think the church can call for the strengthening, the actual protection of property rights. This is, again, something that has not been the case for a while. We have these crazy 99-year lease deals where nobody really actually owns their property. They own the house that's on top of the land, but they don't own the land. For me, I think it would be nice if, the church would push for stronger property rights even in these deals, rather than trying to emulate the Chinese system of 99-year leases. And sometimes people have 999-year leases, which is ridiculous. Everybody knows we don't tend to live as long as Irme Matusala anymore. And so we have to make sure that the property rights are matching that. The second thing, like you said, is this kind of pseudo, and I don't like to even call it ethnic, because it's a fake ethnicity that they're trying to talk about. But this pseudo ethnic linguistic federalism needs to be maybe eschewed, and the way you get rid of it is not maybe all at once, but we need to consult our elders. Where are our elders? Where are our old people? We need to have intergenerational conversation. And this is tough. Most people in Ethiopia nowadays, if not half, are very young. But we need to consult the elders of the community in every one of our communities. We all need to reach out to our various religious organizations. Not everyone in our audience is an Orthodox Christian, but everyone, whatever they are, we need to seek the peace-minded elders in all of our communities and say, what are the historic borders? What are ways that we can organize? What are ways that we could have federalism that are not tied to a fake idea of an identity based off merely a language? What were they historically? And they were different in different periods under different emperors. They were different. If you go back far enough before the modern nation state, we have Zaman Masafant, or the era of princes and rulers. And then it was very different. It was very autonomous. These things change. But we have to look, how was it during the era of princes? How was it done under Emperor Menelik, under
Emperor Tekla Georgis II, under Emperor Johannes, Empress Zoditu, Emperor Lijiyasu, Emperor Haile Selassie. How's it been during the Derg? How has it been in all of these periods? And consult our elders and see, can we come up with any referendums? We saw Brexit happening in England, where they're focusing on their sovereignty and they're trying to determine things more for themselves. How can these local communities and elders have more self-determination in what their boundaries look like? And what would that look like if we don't just magically accept the borders that were given in 1991, which, like I said, is younger than your guest today?
That's an amazing answer. Thank you so much. More on kind of to wrap up this conversation, I wanted to ask you guys what being Ethiopian means to you. I'll start with Diakon Henok, and then Ephrem can pick up.
For me, being Ethiopian, number one, and I don't care how many times we've emphasized it, we're going to keep emphasizing it. The Ethiopian people are a religious people. For around 20 plus years, we had two major prime ministers who did not utter even the name of God. And one of the reasons you saw tears in the eyes of our patriarchs, tears in the eyes of our bishops, tears in the eyes of our people, is because whatever else you want to say about him, our current prime minister, Abiy Ahmed, he knows that the Ethiopian people believe in God. And so he mentioned እግዚአብሔር, he mentioned Amlak, he mentioned the name of God for the first time in so long. And so he showed the people, this is exactly what I believe in, and all of you believe in various things, but we can all agree in God. You know, we express it in many different ways, in many different religions, but this is not an overwhelmingly atheistic, secularistic, or postmodernistic, as we said, westernized, Enlightenment religion, folks. This is a group of people that focuses on God. Second, and related to that, we have many cultures, many languages. You know, on paper, we could say 87. For the most part, we have about 5 or 6 that we can all look into. Hangabarabarati moti da'imi, isma la'alam lu'ul wi'atu, irsu zala'alam negusno. He is king forever. So we can talk about this Fariha እግዚአብሔር, this fear of God that general Ethiopians have. We could explore the languages that people have. Being an Ethiopian for me is fearing God and loving him perfectly, because perfect love casts out fear. Secondly, it's embracing all of the various cultures. I've had people, like I mentioned, in my family who speak Amharic, who speak Oromo, who speak Tigrinya, who speak Afar, who speak Somali, and most importantly to me personally as an Orthodox Christian, who studied the Ge'ez language, Afachonya Fatu, the way they learned education in the traditional way, because my parents were there in the time of the king, was by reading the Johannine letters, by reading the Psalms of David, by reading the Gospel of John in Ge'ez. Whether they understood it or not, irrelevant. And check their Amharic. I bet you they speak better than the people who learned Amharic in the later regimes that came. So digging into the languages, digging into the culture, digging into the religion, being proud of this long storied people that are very diverse, and emphasizing, again, above all else, is peace. Our word salam means peace, but it goes beyond that. It has the idea of being whole and complete. And we are not whole and complete unless we dig ourselves out of poverty. And the only way we're ever going to dig ourselves out of poverty and be, you know, ashamed. I grew up in the 90s when Sally Struthers and other groups, all they had to say about Ethiopia is these are huts, there's famine, there's this. If we want to be a proud people, if we want to spread peace and prosperity, we have to learn how to dig into our religion, our cultures, our languages, our history, everything that Malaka Edom mentioned earlier. And above all, put peace and wholeness at the forefront of our agenda.
I think it's beautiful. I don't want to take much of your time. I do second Henok, whatever you said above. Maybe to add just 2 points. I'm really happy as an Ethiopian in that I can't even translate well into other languages. I'm happy that I'm from a society that says እግዚአብሔር ያውቃል and እግዚአብሔር ካለ. These two are the pillars of my life. እግዚአብሔር ያውቃል and እግዚአብሔር ካለ, እግዚአብሔር ፈቃዱ ከሆነ. So I'm really happy. I'm from a society which in whichever problem they face, they say እግዚአብሔር ያውቃል, እግዚአብሔር አለ, እግዚአብሔር ፈቃዱ ከሆነ. So that really summarizes to be Ethiopian to me, ህይወት.
I really appreciate those answers. This is the last of our event today. Thank you everyone for attending this event and accepting our invitation again. And thank you everyone over YouTube and Facebook that has been following this event and giving us your comments. We really appreciate it. But we just want to make sure that we take something away from this event, from this conversation. And one of it is being really, let us take the homework for ourselves and learn the history of Ethiopia and learn who we are first and foremost before we make commentaries about anything else that happened. And the second is, let us differentiate the bad actors from the whole, right? Let us make sure that when we're speaking about atrocities that are happening in Ethiopia, we are speaking of the specific people that are doing this, not the ethnic group as a whole or not a religion as a whole. So that's all we have for you today. Thank you again. And next week we have, we're going to continue this conversation with the founders of Justice for Ethiopia, and they're going to tell us what they've been up to and why they started that organization as well. So we'll see you next week, and thank you.
Thank you.